All right.
Okay.
All right, I think we're ready to get started. It seems like we're live this time.
Yeah.
um, okay, so welcome and thank you so much for joining us. This is our second artist talk for the current Perspectives exhibit that is up at the Littleton Museum. We are broadcasting on Zoom and Facebook Live. I am Moira Casey. I'm the curator of exhibits here at the Little Museum, and with me I have Jenny Hankinson, our curator of collections, and we're also joined by artists Gabrielle Graves and Courtney Cotton, both of whom are featured in the Perspectives exhibit. So today's talk will feature interdisciplinary artist Gabrielle Graves. I just want to give a quick rundown for anybody who's joined us so far of how it will work for the webinar or the logistics. So Gabrielle is going to present for about 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions both via the Zoom call-in line and Facebook Live Messenger or Facebook Messenger. So for those of you calling in, please use *9 or *9 to raise your hand and be given access to ask your question. And then you can also just post your questions on Facebook. There is a 30-second delay on Facebook from our Zoom feed, so just be aware of that. A few other quick announcements. We have added some things to our exhibit landing page, so if you haven't been to littletongov.org/museum-perspectives, please do check that out. We have some activity cards for this exhibit, which are just sort of prompts or questions to help you engage more with the exhibit. They're really fun. We worked with the artists to create these, and we try and make them for all ages. So if you are currently at home with kiddos and need something for them to do, that's a good thing to do to keep them busy. And then we've also officially extended the exhibit run through August 2nd. I'm still waiting to find out when exactly the museum will reopen, but the good news is that the exhibit will be up longer than originally anticipated, so that when we do reopen, you'll be able to see it until August 2nd. So now I'd like to introduce you to Gabrielle Graves. She is the 2019 winner of the Littleton Fine Arts Board's Eye of the Camera exhibition. The particular exhibit that she won Best of Show for had the theme Evoke. Gabrielle currently works in Ann Arbor, Michigan. She received her BA in psychology with a minor in art and design from the University of Michigan in 2017. After graduating, Gabrielle moved to Snowmass Village, Colorado to intern at Anderson Ranch Art Center in the painting and photography and new media departments. And she also became an artist in residence there. Gabrielle's work explores the complex narrative of identity through her artistic process. Her practice employs photography, painting, video, and installation to create intimate experiences revolving around changing landscapes and internal dialogue. Using alternative processes, repetition, and shifting perspectives, her work navigates the vulnerability of colliding the private internal sphere of the creator with the public external sphere of the viewer. So Gabrielle, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so first off, I just want to thank you all for joining us today. I know it's Friday and there are a lot of other things you could be doing in the current state of our world at the moment. So thank you for joining. I just want to thank Moira and Jenny for all of their hard work for this past year and helping this show go on in the last few months, making sure that it still happened and putting together all of this creative programming for virtual engagement and everything. Courtney and I have really appreciated all of your work. And finally, I just want to thank Courtney. She reached out to me back in December after she won her show and found we were going to have a show together, and it really sparked a beautiful collaborative relationship. And I haven't gotten to meet her in person yet, but I really can't wait to meet her in person and work with her further. It's been a joy to get to know her and her work. So thank you all. I'm just going to get started by sharing my PowerPoint or my presentation with you. So let's see if the share screen feature works. Is that good? We can get a thumbs up maybe. Okay, cool. Just want to make sure it's there. So when I first started thinking about the work that I wanted to show in this exhibit, I had about 3 different projects I was kind of working on at the same time. And I ended up going with the scanner series for the majority of the work, just as I realized how much it had taken up kind of the realm of what I was working in for the last few years. And it started the exploration kind of right when I exited college and came to Anderson Ranch, and moving forward has continued to persist and kind of make on this life of its own. So just to start, I can't, there we go, I have to click, figuring this out as we go. So I use a scanner. It's called Scanner Series because I'm using a scanner to create the work rather than traditional photography with a camera. And these are the two scanners that I use throughout the work. And you can kind of see, I'll point out the differences between the two scanners going through how the work looks at the end based on what I have at the beginning, the technology that I'm using. The one on the left is a more professional scanner. It has a top bed and a bottom bed. And that is what I had access to at Anderson Ranch. It kind of got me into exploring the medium. And then the one on the right is more just a home printer and scanner, and the top lid, it doesn't show in this picture, folds up and there's just like a little scanner bed on top that you can use and hook up to your computer. So it was kind of fun figuring out the different ways that you can use these technologies. And just as a little bit of a history, Sonia Sheridan is actually the person who kind of founded scanography back in 1968. And this is Sonia with a male model that she's taking scans of his face, and you can kind of see at the bottom. And then on the right is another piece. You can see the movement and how you can play with that with scans and kind of the waves that it creates and how the image of the hand comes through. And then here's some more of her work, where she has a student from the Generative Systems program that she founded in 1970 at the School of Art and Institute of Chicago. And on the right or above is a large scale or 2-scale body scan of a model that she did. Then I also wanted to bring up Harold Feinstein's work because you can kind of see a little bit of its influence in my own work. And it really, his work is, he puts flowers and shells, he has a couple books on top of the scanner, and he uses it in kind of a macro photography way where it shows the really beautiful detail and intricacy you can get with this scanner bed. And then having the bed be open, it has such a shallow depth of field, the background just comes to this black backdrop, which really helps the flower to come through. So let me start there. And so my personal exploration with the scanner started, like I said, at Anderson Ranch Art Center, which is kind of fun because Courtney's work that she's showing in the show also was influenced at Anderson Ranch Art Center. So it kind of comes full circle for us there. But I really started just playing with my hands on it and the movement and different things. And I was really enthralled with it and just the way you can use it. And usually scanners are used for documentation, getting physical work into the digital realm to make collages with, or even you can wet scan film images into the computer as well. But I was just kind of making images on my own with them. And one day we had this box of stale donuts in the lab, and I don't even really remember what they were from. And I was really drawn to this star-shaped donut that had these rainbow sprinkles all over it. It was just really nostalgic and had this kind of idea of childhood to it, but I just really wanted to smash it and crush it. So what I ended up doing was I put down, you can kind of see there's a film layer on the bed of the scanner here because I didn't want to get any food on the actual scanner, and that's part of the process, is kind of protecting the equipment that I'm using at the same time. But I put it face down, and just as kind of the setup, you can see here, it goes face down on the scanner, and then you can see what's coming up. You can preview and have it come through. You can choose the different outline or size that you want it to scan. And so I put it in the center. I did some tests with it. And then I ended up just taking hours kind of pulling this donut apart and crushing it and smushing it and using my hands and getting them in there and everything and playing with it. And it was really cathartic and fun and playful, but also like kind of this different perspective of when you see somebody ripping something apart, you see it from top down, and this is bottom up. And so this is one of the images that I created from that kind of narrative that I was making or existing in at that time with the process. And just as a learning, one of the reasons this isn't in the show is because I actually lost all of the files except for this one. And that just goes for a learning experience, that make sure things actually make it onto your hard drive before you move forward. But it's okay. It's learning, like I said, but this is just one of them and where I got my hand in. But also, like, this work kind of exists on a multifaceted scale. And what you see in the show is just these images, all these images that I made with the scanner, but I also have them in video form, or more what I like to call GIFs. They're a little bit of an in-between space because I have quite an affinity for GIFs, and especially at this time in my life when I was at Anderson Ranch in the first starting, I was living away from home for the first time, like for a long period of time. And all the people I cared about were still back in Michigan. I was making some new friends, but there was just this kind of wall I was working through where I was interacting with people through a screen most of the time, through phone calls, through text messages, and GIFs are a way of kind of interacting and communicating with people in a way that shows a little bit more emotion, and our generation uses a lot more as well. So I had all these scans, and they kind of formed this narrative that you could see, and I wasn't sure how I exactly wanted to put them together. And I ended up deciding to put them together in a GIF form. So Google Slides doesn't let me loop the video as the GIF as I normally would. But here is the video that came from the first night with the donuts. And so from there, I kind of just moved forward playing with the scanner and everything in the GIFs. And the next thing that I decided to work on was, I was thinking a lot about mental health, and I had this bottle of pills that I wasn't using. I was using for artistic purposes, and I was getting stuck a lot on the idea of happy pills and, like, take one to feel better and you're fine. And I just had this impulse to draw smiley faces on every single pill. So I dumped them out. There's like 50 to 75, I don't remember. Just painstakingly drew a little smiley face on each one with a pen. And I wanted to kind of work with the narrative itself in this. And I had this idea of like a start, a middle, and an end for a story. But in the process of it, I want to give myself room to be in the moment and work through that narrative without being stuck to a final piece. So I really wanted to smash these pills, was my ultimate goal with it. So what I ended up doing was putting them face down one by one and kind of flipping them and turning them and spilling the whole pill bottle right on the scanners and watching the pills bounce off and come around, and seeing which side they'd land up on, and just taking scans throughout this kind of moment of play. And the triptych that is in the show comes from this series, or this narrative play, where I have stable on the left and then okay, and okay all caps on the right. And you can see the pill dissolves or gets crushed fully. And the reason that I put it in the center exactly is I was told once that centering an object in like a blank space actually has the exact opposite effect of feeling centering. It takes all your attention and brings it into the center. It makes you only look at that one thing, and it's actually very off-putting. So I kind of wanted to do that and have it explode. And by the time that it got to the point where all of the pieces and the fabric was coming apart with the pill, it kind of made me think of like a pill exploding in your brain. This is the other image that is from this narrative, and this is where I was dumping the pills directly onto the scanner, and you can see the movement and what the kind of digital debris that gets left behind with that movement. The rainbow, like half the colors, the little bit of distortion and everything. And I think those are really magical moments that happen with movement, especially with this pill set. And so then this is the GIF or the narrative that came from that. And the next set of pieces that I worked on were the kind of infamous banana. I got a lot of feedback that this made people feel really uncomfortable, which was kind of the goal, to be honest, so I was happy about that feedback. But I'd been thinking, I just kind of get stuck on thinking about certain things sometimes. And like with happy pills, I was kind of thinking about the cliche or idiom of like gone bananas. And there were these rotting, kind of not rotting, but like bananas, you know, when they start to ripen, they get the brown spots on them, and people don't want to eat them once they get the brown spots. Even though they're sweeter than the texture is just not as good, and they're better for baking and stuff at that point. But they're the bad spots that rot, and the little spots you want to take out. So I had this idea of opening up the banana and just scooping out the bad parts of it, and then stitching it back together, and then putting that for display. And this is kind of one of the ones where I had an idea to start with and a part of the narrative that I wanted to go through or work through. And then what kind of ended up happening was I actually also just picked it back up and squeezed all of the banana back out of those stitches that I'd worked really hard to do, because stitching a banana is actually not that easy. And so you can see the progression of that here, and also how I had moved on to instead of using just a transparent film sheet on the scanner bed, I had now had an 8x10" piece of glass that I would tape off the edges for, so that it wasn't rough or hurting the scanner bed glass at all, and then tape it down so that it would stay put, and then I knew what my kind of canvas was that I was working with at that point. And so this is the first image from that, and this is right after I scooped it out and put it all back together, and you can kind of see the crevice of the banana, how the skin's puckering in where one of the bad parts was taken out, and the stitches that came back together. And pink is kind of a color that I like to use throughout my work, and you can kind of see it now from the pills into here and partially in the donut, but it's just a very strong, vibrant, vulnerable color all at the same time that I really enjoy. And then here's the other image from that, and this is titled Ripe. And this is after I'd squeezed the banana right back out, and you can see some of the stitches broke and how it just kind of became this collapsed form, and it looks like you can see the wet spots that the banana left behind and everything. Wow. And this is the video that came from that. So there are a couple different things I wanted to point out with this. You can see where at the times like I choose to include movement versus the times I choose to imply the movement. I think through each scan and like how it's going to be laid out. And at one point I wipe off the screen after I had squeezed out the banana. It became pretty dirty. But I don't show you that I'm wiping off the screen, but I imply it because I show the different frames in between where I started wiping it off to where it actually became clean, rather than at the time when I'm actually moving the banana or something, or my hand is present in it. I also started to really lean into using the tattoo on my left hand that says okay as kind of a branding signature, sort of leaning into this idea of a digital brand, or interacting with people on a digital scale and having something that's recognizable throughout the work. And so the last kind of narrative that I worked through while I was working with this professional scanner was the egg. I was thinking bad egg at the time, was the cliche or idiom stuck in my head. And I was still kind of working with food and this idea of consumption and consuming with media at the same time. And this, I really had to like work on how I was going to protect the scanner, because I don't know if you've worked with egg yolk, but it's really tenacious and will get in anywhere and dries and makes things really messy. So I used a lot of saran wrap with a lot of different layers and tape and that glass plate that I put down. And I did a lot of testing with different colors and different string and yarn to see how it would work. I like to get messy when I'm doing this work. I think that's part of the process and part of the play of it. And so it was one of the stills that came from this, or the frames, is fluid and then kite. And fluid and kite kind of complement each other nicely with the tautness of the string versus the looseness of it. And then the absence of the yoke in this one, but there's a little bit still left on the shell. And this actually doesn't, when I show the video later, that this isn't a frame that went into the video. This is something that was after the fact, once all of the yoke was gone, and I kind of was still playing with the scanner. And this is beaten, and this is from the video that I'll show in a minute too. So that was the last one that I ended up making at Anderson Ranch, like I was talking about. And when I started kind of my trek back to Michigan, and I started looking for jobs, and I was in this very transitory space, and I was thinking back on fruit a little bit more, and stitching, and kind of the catharsis or the therapy of making these stitches, and the idea of domesticity with embroidery and stuff. And so I was practicing a lot, stitching just random fruit, and with whether it had been already skinned or if it was still had the fruit within it, the meat within it, and kind of also working with words. The banana on the left is supposed to say shh, but it kind of came out a little bit different. And so this is part of the research and seeing how I can make things work or not work, and kind of color combinations and different thread if I need to treat it differently, things like that. And then also I had started using my home scanner, my personal scanner that I have. And as you can see, the difference is kind of here. One of the main ones is it doesn't have that nice black background, but it does have a very nice cool gray background that it gives you. And the depth of field looks even more shallow than what the V800 Epson scanner was giving me. And this is a Canon scanner, so different brand, but it's also just the quality of which, or what they're made to do. This one was made more for documents, not necessarily image objects or photos. And so also I didn't realize when I had first started scanning, but the scanner chose what it wanted to scan at that moment. And that's why some of these have different outlines. And what I really enjoyed, giving the scanner autonomy over kind of what its perspective was, what it was seeing at that moment. And that's how we got this really skinny image of this banana that I had let dry out, and then I stitched it back together, or rehydrated it and stitched it back together and stuffed it with some pink string as well. And so I ended up titling this one Pink String Dreams. And then my Clementines, it's working with, there's Oh My Darling and Dreadful Sorry Clementine. And these I had been working with different ways of rehydrating and letting them dry back up. And you can see even more of the shallow depth of field here, and how even the center of, I'm pointing at my screen, but you can't see that. The center of the Clementine gets out of focus and fuzzy here, and just the edges. And it's kind of this beautiful in and out that takes you through. And you can see a fingerprint here. You can see a dog hair here. And that's something that I also enjoyed with working with the scanners. I like leaving in those little pieces of the hand that you can see. You can see the process, even though maybe it's supposed to look kind of pristine. I like showing that it's a little messy and that it was done by hand, and it's not all digital, and there are little remnants of a person there. And also, like these are left hollow, and the next one too with my avocado. This is, that's an avocado skin. And these are left hollow, but then the other one I had stuffed. This is another one where I started putting my hand back in it. And you can kind of see the fingerprints and my hand getting all over the place there. And this is juiced and acidic next to each other. They kind of go. This one I didn't have any stitching or anything, but this one I made in the midst of when COVID first happened, and I was living pretty much by myself. And I had found a rotten lemon in the back of my fridge that I must have forgotten about at some point. And it was just half of it, but it was this really beautiful, like very vibrant yellow color, even though the sides were shriveled up. And I just started making images of it and kind of playing around with it and juicing it on the scanner bed, and putting my hand in it and moving it around, even though rotten lemons do not have the best smell, I would say. No. And this one is one that I ended up making a GIF out of, or a video. And I kind of played around with how the scans intertwined with each other for this one, for the narrative that I was working through in the process. Because I was thinking a lot about touch at that point, because like I hadn't hugged another person in a couple months, and it was just this weird time of existence that I just wasn't sure what was going on. A lot of uncertainty that I know a lot of people were feeling at that time. And so this is the GIF. And so that ends the scanner series and that portion of the work that I had in the show, and brings me to kind of this transitory piece that, or this transitional kind of period that Courtney had the idea for. She had looked through my work and saw this, my work on the right here, called The Things We Take, which is a lot of cyanotypes, and it really, spoke to the blues that she used and the Payne's gray that she uses in her work. And in this, her work on the left is titled A Blue So Blue. And so we kind of thought that this would be a really nice transition on the wall, and like with our work, even though it ended up being intermixed, it looks all of the work, because we originally planned to have like my work on one side of the room, her work on the other side, and Moira did this really wonderful curation of putting it all together. And these two still exist together with by side in the actual space. Hopefully some of you will be able to get it at some point, or see it at some point in person. But it's really nice, and I'm really glad that Courtney thought of this and brought it to my attention, because The Things We Take is a big piece that I made, and it was based on, I like to take quotes down a lot. People will say something that strikes me a certain way, or is really funny, or really speaks to what I'm going through at that moment, even though somebody else had said it, and then I'll just pluck it from that context and write it down, and sometimes write a date, sometimes write who said it. And these all were quotes that I had taken between, I think it was April of 2018 to August or September of 2018. And then that was right before my residency. And during my residency, I ended up taking all of those quotes and writing them down in my own hand, and then making these cyanotypes out of them. And for those that don't know, cyanotypes are like one of the first forms of photography. It's this light sensitive solution that you can either paint, you can get chemicals for and mix it yourself and paint it onto a surface, and then you expose it to the sunlight, and whatever you have on top becomes white as a shadow, and whatever is exposed to the sun turns blue. And you can over and underexpose cyanotypes, so there's a process to it, and I really enjoyed that kind of hands-on process of it, and kind of this beauty of having the sun of the same place where these words were spoken kind of imprint them onto these pages. And so this is some of the work that I did going forward. On the left, I was trying to decide, I was seeing what different thickness of Sharpie and things were working on those transparency sheets. I would write out and then place them on top of the sheets to expose them. And then in the middle, I was trying different kind of forms of writing, different ways of writing it down, and putting some objects on top to see how the words played with the objects. And on the right, you can see washing out the cyanotypes after they get exposed. They'll turn this kind of color when they start getting exposed. And then when you wash it out, the water turns kind of green, and you have this nice blue background to them. It's really rich, lovely color. This is just some more examples of when I was exposing the work and when I started using like found objects that were interacting with the words themselves and the quotes. Put a pebble on this one, and this one I was holding, I think, my coffee cup in the morning, and I was like, all right, gonna just spill some of that on there. And this is that one right here with the coffee. So you can kind of see how it exposes differently across where it's the coffee's denser versus where it's not, but you still get a little bit of that shadow there. So these are some of the examples of the quotes that I have. You can read them all. There's a link to my site that has all of them, and these were documented with a scanner, so it goes for a circle there too. You can get items that already have, or paper that already has the cyanotype solution on it, and usually it's like tight to the edges. But what I really loved about painting it on into these ripped pages is you could see the influence of the hand. You could see the paint strokes of the material of the solution. And these are some of my quotes that I really love. I'll call you when the clouds are falling. This one I took blades of grass onto it. And the one on the right I used thumbtacks. And some of them did get over or underexposed, and you can kind of see going through. I wanted to put these into a keepsake box, or a box that it's like a loose leaf book, and as you can see, it's displayed with clothesline and clothespins. But it's a loose leaf book too, so I wanted it to have like its own little keepsake box that it could go with. And originally I tried laser cutting some cardboard to make like a shoebox type thing, but there was just too much of the influence of the laser cutter, and I kind of wanted this to have more of like a hand focus to it, like a hand process that you could see the influence of. So I ended up making my own wooden box for this in the wood shop, and then I also made I did use the laser cutter to engrave the things we take the title onto a clear acrylic lid, so that when the sun or light shone through, you could see the shadow of the title onto the loose leaf, which I thought was kind of indicative of that sunlight coming through and imprinting the words. And so that's about all I have to give. I'm just going to leave you guys with one of my favorite quotes that I think going forward is important for life. It's just, this is a learning process, not a perfection process. Should I stop?
Great. Well, thank you, Courtney, or Gabrielle. Sorry, I was looking at Courtney. Thank you, Gabrielle. That was awesome. I think we probably have some questions. Jenny, do you have any on Facebook?
No questions yet. I do have a question, but if you want to go ahead and start with some of the other ones.
Yeah, I have some. So let's see. Basically, it sounds like you have and I think that quote you just mentioned at the end really sums it up, but this approach that, about learning and play, and so much of the series is about experimentation. So I wondered, and also being that many of the works in this exhibit are from the Scanner series, I just wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about any of the digital photography that you do with an actual digital camera, and sort of the difference between, I don't know, when I think about that type of photography, it does seem more controlled and precise, and you're able to get a very clean look. So I guess I'm curious as to whether or not you do use a digital camera in that way, or if you sort of find ways to replicate that sense of freedom and experimentation, even with that type of medium.
That's a good question. I do normal digital photography. I think part of it is I've always kind of pushed back against being a photographer. I don't feel like I know enough to call myself a photographer, but I enjoy the medium itself, and I enjoy really good photography and seeing like artistic photographers and their work and everything. And I think part of it is just having that process. Like sometimes I feel like I snap an image and it's kind of done. And I mean, I'll work with it later and I'll edit it and everything, but I lose that process of working with my hands, which I enjoy. But I do really love still photography. I think I just have a lot more to learn to kind of bring it full circle for myself. But I do a lot with studio work, where I have controlled lighting and stuff and kind of make my own world when I'm using digital photography. And then I have another series that I've been working on where I'm just kind of exploring the world around me and trying to take my camera with me everywhere, and kind of find these moments that speak to me, much like these quotes that speak to me and things like that. So, if that answers your question.
Yeah. So have you ever tried any other historic photographic processes, like, you know, in addition to cyanotapes, like wet plate or anything like that, that might feel a little more hands-on for you?
I haven't gotten the chance as much. That's something that I really want to be able to pursue. I just haven't had the access to it yet. We didn't have a dark room in my college at University of Michigan where I went to school, so I wasn't able to learn there. I also wasn't a full art student, so I didn't have full access to everything. But moving forward, that is something that I want to learn how to do more, is those alternative processes.
Cool. Cool. We do have a question from Facebook. And which process do you enjoy the most and why?
Process. Ooh. Um, just a photography, or I don't know. I think it's a really hard question. It's a good question, but I don't know if I enjoy anything more than another. Like each process, I think, has its place, and its use. And if there's a certain way that I want to say something or do something, like I'll find the process that feels best for that, and kind of the things that I want to do with it. So sometimes it's straight digital photography. Sometimes it's the scanner. Sometimes it's installation. Sometimes it's painting. And sometimes it's a mix of all of those and kind of moving forward with that. So.
Me again. uh, so the exhibit is called Perspectives. We talked last week about Courtney's use of perspectives or the term, the thought idea behind perspective in her work. And I think you've each approached it with your own unique emphasis. And you mentioned a little bit, which I love, this idea of leaving, you know, the hair and the hand and every, you know, the smudge, the fingerprint, to kind of allude to that and draw people's attention to the idea of perspective. So just anything else you want to talk about on how you brought that in when you were thinking about this particular exhibit and that theme? Because I think it's also really unique, especially with photography as a medium, because I feel like I know when I'm hanging artwork and I see a hair between the glass and the photograph, I'm like, ah, like, so for you to intentionally put that in there, it's, you know, for me, I'm like, wow, I do need to think about this concept of everything you look at and see, you know, it's easy to forget the middle ground or to think about the, you know, the artist, their thought behind it and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, so I think you just want me to talk about bringing the idea of perspective more into, okay. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I've been thinking a lot about that because I feel like as an artist, like I think there's a quote even somewhere, like maybe it's painting specific, but like you do what you know. And it's kind of like this, even though maybe I'll think about different perspectives when I'm making work, it's my perspective, like it's how I'm thinking and how I'm feeling and what I'm doing. And using the scanner, like it has that physical sense of a changed perspective and the literal sense of a changed perspective. But for me, I was thinking a lot about kind of this translation of perspective of like momentary doing it and working through a process, and then putting it into a digital realm, and then even further like editing it or showing it in a different form, in like the video form rather than just an image. And I think about kind of the moments when we're sitting by ourselves, and thinking and how we perceive ourselves, and then how we feel like we're presenting ourselves to someone else, and then how we're actually seen. And especially I think that's just made even more inherent on social media and things that we're using for forms of connection now and showing perspective and ideas and stuff. And yeah, so it's kind of multifaceted and really gets really clouded in my own head, but I'm trying to work through that.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think it comes across for the viewers. I mean, just the idea of using rotten fruit, you know, and making it beautiful. I mean, these artworks are beautiful. I'm fortunate enough to be right next to them in the gallery. So, but they really are, you know, when you look at them there, and it's, I mean, that's a different perspective. When I see a rotten banana in my refrigerator, there's nothing that strikes me as beautiful about that. So, so I think it's a really, really well done. Jenny, do you have any
Yes,
other?
got a couple more. One was more of a statement, but you might be able to speak to it. I was going to ask you if you were still recording quotes, but it sounds like you've moved on to a different way of expressing that idea with your picture taking. Very cool. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Oh yeah, no, I definitely still am recording quotes. It's just I didn't when I started recording the quotes back from April to September, it was something that I already did, but I just did it more intentionally with making sure I knew who had to set it and when, and that it was all said within this certain time frame. Because it was my second summer in Snowmass, and I really wanted to be intentional about it and do something with that further. So I still am writing quotes down. I just haven't done anything with them yet, and maybe I will do something with them again, similar or different in the future. But that is something that I still do all the time. Just when somebody says something or I hear something that is like, oh, that's great, I need to write that down.
So I think Courtney's got a question if you want to jump in.
Unmute here. So I love the presentation and learning about the history of scanography. I did have a question that's kind of funny. How do you rehydrate a banana or a clementine?
Yeah, so I mostly just put them back in like boiling water or hot water. I'd let them sit and kind of, yeah, gather that water back up after a while. And sometimes it would be boiling, and sometimes I just let them sit overnight. And it became, at one point, it kind of became this weird earthy tea, because I had like the avocado peels in there and the clementine peels and the banana peels in it.
Yeah, roommates.
I did at that point. I was just kind of like hiding this fruit in my room. I didn't want anyone to see what I was doing with it. But yeah, it was a fun time.
I feel like my kids would love you because that's all they do in the yard is make like soup, you know, with random things they find in the yard.
Yes, I used to do that too. It's so much fun.
Any others from Facebook, Jen?
Yeah, we've got one more. Do you buy fruit now with the idea of letting it go bad to potentially use for your scanner images?
No, I don't. I try to be mindful of waste. And so usually if it's something that already has the fruit in it, I'll either plan to eat it later, or it had already gone bad on its own accord and it wasn't something intentional that I did. And yeah, so sometimes like if I do like the clementine skins, I went through a phase where I was eating like bags upon bags of clementines, and I would just keep all the skins afterwards, or the peels. I keep calling them skins, but all the peels afterwards. So I ate them. I just kept the peels for later.
So I have another question. There are a lot of series in this exhibit, and you did talk about some other pieces that didn't seem to be series. I was curious, and this is a plug for people who haven't been to our exhibits page, not the landing page for this exhibit, but on the museum website, you can see all of our exhibits for the year. And there's sort of a summary of your guys' work and the photos of the works that you won the previous year's exhibits for. So your piece that was Best of Show, A Temporary Martyr, I was curious as to whether or not that is from a series. And then just if you could speak to whether or not you feel like some ideas that you have to be worked out through multiple works to really fully access or get to your narrative, or if you do also have success playing out a narrative or getting your idea across in individual pieces.
Yeah, that is a good question. I feel like I kind of go back and forth, and there's definitely some things that are longer term and exist as a series, and then there are things that exist independently, like the piece that won the show last year, Temporary Martyr, is existing on its own, and it was just one of those things that I had this overwhelming like creative impulse to do. It just was in my head and I could not get it out, and I was thinking of the Death of a Martyr. I can't think of the name of the painting now. The Death of Marat, I think. Yeah. And I was thinking about that painting. I was thinking about somebody had told a story about their own work, and they were thinking about onsetting amnesia for like based on cold water immersion, to get rid of this pain that they were feeling. It's a story. And I was just like kind of taken aback with all these different ideas at once, and it just culminated in my head. And I was like, I just have to make this image and like put this work into fruition. And I did, and it ended up being successful in one thing instead of becoming like an ongoing series. And maybe it could be at some point if I start working with it further. But yeah, I think just sometimes like you get an idea and it's so strong and like so strong in feeling and thought that you just kind of have to do it, and those can exist on their own as well.
So if I can jump in, I actually have a question. A lot of art, we don't see the hand of the artist. Can you talk about that decision to scan your own hand a little bit? That would be kind of interesting to hear about, that kind of behind the scenes, behind the veil, and then actually sharing your hand, and then with it also your tattoo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question too. I think the desire to put my hand in it, I don't know if it started as a really conscious effort, but I think it was just kind of, I used it as a stand-in for myself at the time, and just a representation, and also like, yeah, showing the physical hand, and like probably been thinking about touch and like meaning of it, and really I love work a lot of the time that you can see the hand of the art, and maybe not the literal hand, but like you can see their intent, you can see the marks that they've made, or the different things that they've done in that way. And so I was maybe literally just sticking my hand in there and kind of using it as a prop itself. And so a stand-in for myself, but also once removed, and so kind of that phrase. I don't like doing like self-portraits as much, so I think that was probably also part of it. It's kind of its own self-portrait. And then did you ask to explain about my tattoo, or just is that okay? Yeah, so it says okay, I don't know if you can see, and it's kind of a funny story. So there was an artist doing stick and poke tattoos, and so a couple of my friends and I were getting them, and I was the last person to go, and the artist that was doing them does really beautiful work, and did some really nice ones before. It was getting kind of late, and what I had originally wanted was a cactus in a pot, because I was explaining why. It was just when I was in school, something that my professor had said to me, or one of my mentors, was that I was one of the most tenacious painters he had ever seen, because he could see me come in and just be angry and like still work through it, and like all of the things that I was mad about and not working with the painting, like I was still there and I was still coming in and working through it. And I was like, and cactus, like they're so tenacious, like you don't have to water them. They're just like, I'm okay and I'll get through it and I'll make it through, and kind of, they're really tough but also like really soft, and they have fruit on the inside, and kind of these, I don't know, this really interesting plant that I really loved. And while I was telling this story, one of my friends was like, why not just get okay? Like, I'm okay. Like, this is okay. And you're going to make it, and you're going to make it through. It's like, yeah, I'll just do okay then. And I kind of like it. It's a little different and fun.
All right. I love that, by the way. It's like so simple, and then it's the title of one of your pieces too. And I think that was really cool that it sort of, like you said, becomes a brand throughout. I also think it's really interesting. It's the first time I really thought about how that could be sort of a self-portrait. And then we have Courtney's portraits from her collaboration as well in the exhibit. So it's really nice that you guys are both in your different forms present in the exhibit more visually than just, through your work. I had another one. So you talked a little bit about the work Juiced was the one I think you said you did during the first sort of quarantine or stay-at-home order for COVID-19. And I think, there's obviously been this concept about mental health issues surfacing, maybe a little bit more for certain people during this period. And I think that's a subject that you both touch on in your work quite a bit. So just any comments that you want to make in regards to whether or not it changed your approach, either for that particular artwork or any others that you're working on, whether or not they're in the exhibit, or if there's any, you also talked about earlier, sort of the terminology, gone bananas, happy pills, that kind of stuff. So anything else you want to add to that concept of sort of these stereotyped terminology when addressing mental health issues, and how you try and focus your work to maybe shed light on that or draw attention to it?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely something I address in my work regularly and sometimes consciously, and maybe not so much in others. And it's something I wanted to include just as part of the work that I do, is to I can't think of the words right now, but that I want specifically, but to work against those stereotypes in a way, but by drawing attention to them and like talking about things and talking about mental health. And that's the way that we're going to move forward with making it okay, is talking about it and kind of showing these things in a beautiful way and working through them, rather than just saying like, we're not going to deal with it, or we're just going to ignore it and call it a bad thing and say like, it's all bad. So I think there are good aspects of it, and like we still need to feel the things we feel, but we need to acknowledge it and talk about it and move forward. And then it was definitely something that I was thinking about a lot more during the stay-at-home orders, and like something I was feeling a lot more in the state, like when I was talking to friends and things, and it was harder to make work for a bit in that point. And so that lemon kind of like brought me back into making for a second, where I like was able to work through kind of the feelings that I was having at that time, and like I was saying, like missing touch and missing seeing friends, and realizing that I'd just forgotten about this thing in the back of my fridge, and like, needing to take care of things, obviously, and like take care of my fridge. But yeah, so it's definitely something that I've talked about with Courtney, that we both have in our work. And it's something that's important for us to talk about going forward as well. And yeah, I think even in using those kind of stereotypes and stuff, it's shedding light on it at the same time that I'm using them. I'm not using them in a derogatory way. It's more just like, this is an idea, and like maybe if we see this video all together, we can cultivate some empathy with thinking through how this person's feeling, or this. And now I'm rambling, but I hope that answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think dialogue is, and I think that's hopefully the way we continue to go as a society, is having that dialogue and moving away from, the unfortunate stereotype and locking people up and, sort of the bad place, the unhelpful place that it used to be, and helping, discuss and talk about it. And like you said, people have different feelings and they definitely need to be addressed. But I love it seems more lighthearted in your work too, the way it's like you can talk about it without it being so serious. And I think people probably hopefully get some relief from that. It seems less scary. I think it's something that so many people deal with, and hopefully through seeing both your and Courtney's work, we can get this sense of understanding and normalization, and everybody goes through these things together. And yeah, so and it's just about having different perspectives on it. So
Yeah, very true.
any others, Jenny, from Facebook?
Yeah, we've got one more. How do you go about choosing the thread color in your scanner series? I noticed the pink thread contrasts with the Clementine versus the green thread with the avocado peels, which kind of follows the theme. So they were wondering if there was a purpose behind that.
Yeah, so first with the banana, pink was kind of the only color I had, but it was the color that I was speaking to me at the time that I wanted that color. I just didn't know I was going to specifically use it for that banana at that time. And like I said, pink is kind of one of my favorite colors and exists throughout all my work, even like my paintings and things like that. Pink and blue are the colors that you can kind of find. And it's just very vibrant, and it went against the drying parts or the over ripening parts of like the banana and anything else. And then when I started getting into doing the clementines and the other and the avocado and stuff, I was thinking a little bit more on like implementing a different color of string and using that contrast with the blue with the clementine, and bringing in that other color that I really loved, and kind of brings you in a little bit more to a different kind of softness with that blue. And then with the green, I was going back and forth with the color with the avocado, but I kind of wanted to call back to the inside, the flesh color of the avocado. And since the outside skin is so dark, I don't know if I needed something that was contrast or just to bring kind of the idea to bring back like what was lost from inside that a little bit more with that color. And then the banana that I had the pink string inside of, that pink was already there. And then again, like kind of akin to the original color of the banana, bringing that yellow stitching back in when bringing it back together. So it's kind of in, and again, it goes back to my process of, I have some things, some ideas before, and then like when I'm in it, I'll change, and maybe I'm like, oh, this color feels right with this and looks a little bit better. And the reasoning behind it in that moment kind of sets in.
So was the prepared, you knew that's what you were going to stitch, or was that something that just sort of came out as you were?
Yeah, it was something that I just kind of stitched. I was trying to think of, because I work with words a lot, and a lot of repetitive words that I have in my head, and then we all kind of like get stuck in those thought spirals. And was just, it was something I was just confused about what was happening. I think it was right before like the stay at home was going on, and I was just in this kind of state of limbo and transition. And so but also there was two others that I'd stitched that I didn't really show. There was the that I had come up with before, but I didn't really, the images that came out from that I wasn't really happy with as much. And then I was trying some new things, and I tried with just normal digital photography as well to get that black background. I had written be something on two different clementines, and then I also written or stitched, I guess, in embroidered this is strange, I don't remember, something, bringing out the weird. I had stitched into a lime or a lime skin, and I liked kind of some of those images, but I was going back and forth with including too much text or not, especially with all of the images that I was including. So I ended up leaving out that lime just because I thought maybe it had too much language with it at that time for the rest of the pieces.
Are they going to be on your website? I'd love to see those.
Yeah, I'll put it on my website for sure. I need to update that, so thanks for reminding me.
Which, speaking of, I think we should probably, if we can, add those gifts to the digital exhibit.
Yeah, definitely. Send those over.
Cool. Anything else? It is 5 o'clock, so we could sign off unless there are any more. Speaking of adding to the digital exhibit, one thing I forgot to mention before is that we are working on the virtual tour. So we are still on schedule to have that on the 26th of June. It will be added to the landing page, the exhibit landing page. So if you haven't already, go check out that page. This is the last of the artist talks that we have scheduled currently, but we're always updating it. So follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Go check out the page, see the digital exhibit. And after the 26th, we'll be able to see the virtual tour inside the museum. And then hopefully eventually you'll actually be able to physically come back in. So any other final remarks, Courtney, anybody? Thank you guys so much for joining. Thanks, Gabrielle, for your presentation today, and Courtney for yours last week. It was really great to hear more about your work and get to know you guys a little bit more. We hope you guys have a lovely weekend. If you're in Denver, stay cool. It's gonna be a hot one, and we will see you all again soon.
Likewise. Thank you, Gabrielle.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you guys. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.